Claudia Sheinbaum achieved a decisive victory in the Mexican presidential election. And joining us now to assess her policy agenda is Sitt. He is Thor Equites founder and chairman, and of course, Wall Street Week's David Westin. And it really feels like markets, of course, are still digesting those election results.
Yeah, exactly. Not quite sure what to make of it. We'll find out. So, Joe, we're really good to have you with us. I must say, first of all, you predicted she'd win. She won. She's now president-elect. But tell us how investors are reacting to this right now. You've said that actually the dollar Mexican peso cross is a barometer of this. If you look at that, the peso's not doing so well.
I think that the market today is in a state of panic because of the unknown. Always the unknown is a little bit worse than even bad known, so to speak. And you do have a couple of reasons for trepidation. You've got 30 days where AMLO, before she comes into the office, could do whatever he wants because of his control of the Congress. 2, he's looking and she's looking to change the way judges are selected. They did, I candidly feel like a phony poll where they asked the people, should we change the way it's being elected? And their answer was 70% agrees. But what they didn't say is 80% of the 70% don't even understand the question they got asked. And then last and certainly not least is right now it's a 6-year term for somebody to become president. What nobody's noticing is they changed the law to allow a check at the end of 3 years so that there's a popular vote to say, should we have another election now? And that's sort of like a hammer that AMLO will have to hold over her head. So those are the 3 things that are giving the world trepidation right now.
And so, of course, those are the risks, and you can see that translated into the currency market. But as an investor in Mexico, of course, what do you see as the opportunities when you do think about her policy priorities?
I'm excited. I think about business, I think about economics, I think about security, and all 3 I'm pumped. 1 is in terms of industrial development. That's one of the biggest demand needs. In fact, the headline I saw inside on Bloomberg was the power grid is going to be challenged. That's really a challenge we've had throughout the AMLO administration, not enough power. And she's committed to bring in the private sector to service that power needs. And she has one wild commitment. She wants to see 100 industrial parks developed within her first year of the presidency. Very pro-business. Second thing I would say is a fellow named Garcia Harfuch. He was her head of security when she was the mayor of Mexico City. And we really saw, while a lot of issues in the rest of the country, or certain parts of the rest of the country, Mexico City's been pretty smooth, pretty safe, pretty well run. And now she's just nominated him to take the federal role. So I think that's a big, big positive for the marketplace. And then last but not least, Marcelo Ebrard, who is, successful, respected from a finance, et cetera, point of view. He's going to be coming into office and taking that role. So I think 3 very, very big positives. Probably the big unknown, I know he was saying it as I was walking in and I didn't get to give him my answer, was what happens with the relationships with the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, pick up on that specifically, because Mexico is positioned in some ways between the United States and China. And the question is that an advantage for Sheinbaum as she comes in, or is that a risk for her?
Okay, I think that she made one of her priorities, people aren't realizing it, keeping a good relationship with the United States. She realizes how important NAFTA is. And yes, while she's from the more left-leaning, so everybody thinks it's only positive if Biden stays in, it's really positive both ways. She's got the relationship there. But what everybody's forgetting is Marcelo Ebrard, who's now got the new finance position, so to speak. He was actually the fellow that put the country's greatest award over the head of Joshua Kushner for making the deal, the new revised NAFTA deal with the United States of America. So I think that she's covering all bets, whether it's a Biden presidency or a Trump presidency. She's prepared for the positive. She's prepared to make good. And I think this is a bump along the way, and it's not the only market that we're seeing bumps, Take a look at Europe.
Take a look at Europe. Yeah. Well, before we get to Europe, and I'm glad, of course, you made the point that whether it's Trump or Biden in November, that you feel pretty positive on both outcomes here. But talk to us about commercial real estate when it comes to the Mexican market, because you think about commercial real estate in the U.S. and people are still waiting for another shoe to drop. But what's the landscape look like in Mexico?
A lot of things I find globally run in cycles. The United States is starting to, outside of the office market, certain categories have run hotter. It's had success over the last decade. Europe and Mexico have been pretty beaten down. And I think that it's a market that will benefit on the way up from global macro, conflict with China, to be blunt, as well as more and more positive relationships with the United States. Who in the world has become the single biggest beneficiary of the conflict between the West and specifically the United States and China? It's Mexico. One of the things that you just brought up, David, was a great point inside. Who's the most active new business signing leases in Mexico? It's Chinese that are relocating to Mexico to get around the issue. So with that massive demand for industrial sites, industrial production shifting from China to Mexico, that creates positive momentum for the economy and for the day laborer, for the for the country's big picture labor markets in general. That positivity, that more income feeds into the system. So I think that all of the domestic side has been benefiting. That'll flow through to what I call the business to business real estate market. And then look at the other side, business to consumer, where we're extremely active. We're probably the most active luxury hotel developer in Latin America, specifically anchored in Mexico. We're seeing the business come, tremendously strong from the United States and Canada and even further south. People are loving Mexico for their vacation. People like that. That type of market where you can get away from it all, so to speak. And a weak peso probably make it even better for Americans and Westerners to go there.